Alcatraz is a San Francisco landmark. Back in the day, the Rock, as it's known, jailed America's most notorious criminals. The worst of the worst, they were called. Sound familiar? That distinction now belongs to the controversial detention facility at Guantanamo Bay, or GTMO, home to alleged terrorists. The worst of the worst, we're told. But talk to Terry Holbrooks, a former GTMO guard, and he says when it comes to Guantanamo Bay, America has it all wrong. He says torture and prisoner abuse was routine, in fact encouraged by the military's top brass. As for the claims worst of the worst, he says wrong again.
They may have been educated, talented, whatever the case may be. Do you think they were terrorists?
No.
Why do you think they were there then?
It's a story the U.S. government probably doesn't want you to hear. Terry Holbrooks, his thoughts and experience on GTMO, torture, and the cover-up, in his own words.
One of the things that I wanted to ask was, when we talk about GTMO, the whole issue of torture and beatings and whatnot come up. Did you see any of that?
Some of it. Some of it, yeah. I'm not going to say that torture doesn't happen in Guantanamo, because it does. Generally, the torture usually took place during interrogation. That's more often than not, if any type of torture was going to occur, it happened during interrogation. However, that's just torture. Torture and abuse, I think, are two completely different matters. And abuse would take place anytime that an emergency reaction force, an IRF force, was called onto the block for whatever situation was going on. It wouldn't be uncommon to see a couple guards, being unnecessarily rough, overly rough. The general mentality that guards had in Guantanamo was, if I get an extra punch or kick in or whatever, hey, I'm getting one for America.
Did you, at one point at all, try and talk to people who are involved in these methods and say something like, yeah, maybe there's a better way, what are you doing, what are we doing?
With the way that Guantanamo was set up, with the way the administration was running it, the individuals that were in charge of Guantanamo, from General Jeffrey Miller down to the lowest of the guards, abuse and unnecessary roughness is rewarded. You have a detainee who's maybe all of 110, 120 pounds, and he's in a cell, and he's angry or upset about something, and as a result, we cover him with OC spray, pepper spray basically, and then send 5 men wearing riot gear into his cell to shackle him, shave his beard, and take him out of the cell. It was just completely unnecessary. Why? Like, such a great extreme to go to for something that could have been resolved with words, and it was just the way that the Army wanted to do it.
Well, let's back up a little bit and talk about either the torture or the abuse. Do you think that it had an effect? I mean, did it solicit information, and what were the reactions of detainees?
The fact of the matter is this last administration has only shown evidence on 5 detainees out of the 774. Torture hasn't brought us anything. It hasn't helped us in any way, shape, or form. Every war that America has ever won historically, we won it because of the fact that we gained the support of the people. We gained the support of the countries that we were in or that we were fighting with. I don't think torturing is ever going to solicit answers. It's not going to help. There was a number of detainees who pled guilty to acts of, something as far out as being Osama bin Laden's driver or his cook or his chief financial consultant or whatever. They're pleading guilty to these things, and then as they would go to their trial, evidence would be shown, you weren't anywhere near Afghanistan when this happened. You were on the other side of the world working. We have video footage and bank statements. Why did you say this? Because you're torturing me. I just wanted to go. I was tired of the torture. So yeah, obviously it hasn't helped us.
Okay. And those cases, of course, that you point out, maybe torture was the reason why they admitted to being guilty or whatnot, but some of the research shows, and I believe one of the investigators' name was Ali Soufan, and his interrogation did get the names of the Padilla and Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, supposedly from his interrogation methods and whatnot. So in some instances, then, do you feel...
I would imagine that his interrogation methods are probably different from the ones that we saw as standard operating procedures in Guantanamo. Standard operating procedure in Guantanamo was anything that you can use to either create a mass amount of discomfort or to instill fear. That was the methods that were commonly taking place, and I don't think anything significant or credible has really come out of it. It hasn't shown to be a useful tool.
Okay, well, you were there, so you saw all of this. But when you talk to an American public, perhaps, there are people who fear these terrorists, who are told that these are the worst of the worst, that they have, links to Al-Qaeda or whatever. How would you address their concerns that if this is an issue of national security, if we need to protect our borders and protect the people inside, how do we do that?
The fact of the matter, I feel, entirely too many Americans are just unintelligent towards the reality of what's honestly happening and taking place. We're not at war with terror. The problem about trying to have a conversation like that with the average American is more often than not the average American is so believing of this smokescreen that's been pulled over them that they've become racist. They're racist to the Muslim population. They don't want Islam anywhere in America. And it just doesn't make sense to me. How can you look at a quarter of the world's population and think that it's honestly a threat? If the quarter of the world didn't like America, I'm pretty sure America wouldn't be here.
One of the statistics you had mentioned, there was over 700 detainees at Guantanamo, and 400 or so have been released. What does that say? How did those people get to Gitmo? And if these are the worst of the worst and we're letting everybody go,
the worst of the worst. Yeah, let's talk about that one for a second. One of the things that I took out of Guantanamo that really was just complete joy to me was listening to all of these guards and all these individuals who were training us, telling us these are the worst of the worst, these are a bunch of dirty towel heads and yada yada yada, all the derogatory terms that they would use. And then at the same point in time saying that they're just dumb dirt farmers. We get down there, the average detainee speaks 3 to 5 languages. I grew up in America, I don't even speak English well, and it's my native language. Here's an individual who can speak English, Arabic, Pashto, Urdu, and French, and he's fluent with all of them. And this wasn't a big deal. This was the common. Majority of the detainees were very bilingual, trilingual, moving on. A lot of them had PhDs, a lot of them were doctors, lawyers, pharmacists. These aren't dumb people, and they're not the worst of the worst. I grew to a point to where I could walk a detainee up and down a block, take him to interrogation, take him to the showers, etc. I didn't have to put shackles on them.
They may have been smart, they may have been educated, talented, whatever the case may be. Do you think they were terrorists?
No.
Why do you think they were there then?
Wrong place and the wrong time. That's pretty much been the evidence that's come out with the 560, I believe, we've sent home now. That's the case with the Tipton trio, case with Binyam and Mozam and all the other celebrities of the situation. The only ones who've really ever been guilty, they've said they were guilty. David Hicks didn't ever tell me once, no, I'm not a terrorist. He never argued with me about it. He told me straight up, yeah, I went to a Taliban training camp. I wanted to fight with the Taliban. I wanted to fight with Al-Qaeda.
So if the United States got one, then is it worth it? I mean, all that we've been through and put through with Guantanamo.
Nowhere near. Nowhere near. If anything, we've created more terrorists by starting this war. If you take innocent people and you lock them up, you steal 7, 8, 9 years of their life, I think you kind of give them a reason to not like you. That's a pretty big reason as far as I'm concerned. So that's more so what I'm concerned about, is the idea that if they weren't terrorists then, well, they're probably going to be now.
Do you at all feel maybe remorseful or guilty about your time at Guantanamo?
No. I didn't choose to go there, and unfortunately I had to serve under an administration that had no idea what they were doing. If I had reacted like some of the other guards had reacted, yeah, I'd probably feel remorse. I'd probably have some issues and some shame and some problems with it, but I don't feel any remorse. I didn't do anything down there.
When we talk about people who've come to Guantanamo, Gitmo, obviously, we've been told these are the worst of the worst, but you're suggesting that these have been people, wrong place, wrong time. Are there people out there that we need to be going after, and if so, how do we get them, or what do we do next?
Effectively, I think proper conversation and understanding with the Taliban would really help take care of the Taliban situation. Honestly, we just need to bridge the gap between the East and the West. America has no understanding of the Middle East. We have no understanding of governments that are based, Islamic law, etc. We don't understand it. We can't fathom it. And on the same side of it, the Middle East doesn't necessarily teach about America in a proper light either. We both need to have a better understanding of the other side so that we can both bridge that connection between the two and help have a more prosperous future.